Hey y'all, I'm the captain, and this is Sailing on the Spectrum, where I talk about the challenges growing up with autism spectrum disorder. Welcome aboard. Today I want to talk about something that is very common for many of us on the spectrum, and that is intense and acute interests. And I mean interests that are can be very specific, not just in certain generalized things, but they can even be interests in parts of things, uh, and they can be very intense. They can be an object of very obsessive focus. Some would say. I mean, it's not necessarily a full-on obsession, but it can certainly come off as that. And I would say it's probably something that many of us use to cope, especially because we experience sensory overload, and sometimes just being able to, I guess, narrow or have our mind focus on something specific can sometimes be a way of grounding ourselves, in order for us to not, become very uh, overwhelmed. And, uh, it's just, there's all kinds of things that I can easily remember just from even my early childhood that I remember noticing that still to this day, sometimes just sometimes my mind just, has its interest peaked in it. And one, like for instance, I could have look at cars or trucks, and I could look at the wheels on, let's say, on a truck, and I could see the size of the wheel face in comparison with maybe the tire. I mean, maybe I would like it if the tire were maybe, not as fat or something, or maybe it were, and something like that, is one of those things that just kind of energizes my mind, or kind of, becomes one of those. I'd love it if it were this way, and I hate it when I see it this way, and then, I remember it's like, these are just the oddest, most oddball things, but let's say lawnmowers. I like it, if on a lawnmower, there's like the lawnmower and it has a side discharge where the grass will come out. And if it doesn't have one of those guards on it, if it's just, the spout, you know, just wide open, I wouldn't like it. I'd want it to have a guard, and it's just weird how my mind, you know, it's like almost like my mind has some comfort, in it being the way that I like. And it's weird because it just seems kind of insignificant and trivial and inconsequential to anything and anybody, but to me, it always just felt, I don't know how to explain it. It just felt very comforting and very settling, when I saw something like that, and it was the way I liked. Um, I like, um, there were other things, that may be a little bit easier to grapple with. Well, no, there's one other thing. I mean, over the years, I came to enjoy playing some sports. I never did go and start to play on a team or anything, but I liked to play. I got good at shooting basketball. Um, I could play. I didn't play many other sports. I did play some golf, but I liked. Later on, especially in my teenage years, I kind of had an interest in, watching a lot of games on television, and I like to watch baseball. I remember really obsessing about baseball, especially baseball history, um, when I was probably about 12. It's just one of those things that just kind of caught me, and it was one of those escapes. and I liked to also see basketball games too. I liked to watch them on TV, and sometimes it's like weird because even when I'm watching it on TV, and I would go to see some basketball games in person too. Uh, Not many, but even watching them on TV, sometimes I'd be interested in just the sound that the buzzer would make. Whenever you know, the period would end. Sometimes I'd want it to be, I'd like it if it were a certain sound, and I wouldn't like it if it were another, if it didn't think it was actually loud enough, or something, because that was odd. Because normally us and on the spectrum, we don't like loud noises, but sometimes it's like one of those things like I want something to be a certain way, and so I wanted it to be the buzzer to be louder, and it's just weird because it's one of those things that you get charged up for, and it doesn't make sense to anybody, and it doesn't even make sense, maybe even to me, why it is that way, but that's just how my mind is. But I um I've always enjoyed watching, a lot of classic ball games, from like years past, sometimes just as a like even while I'm even in the kitchen making dinner, maybe, I'll want to do that, and just have a game on my phone, up on the counter, and maybe have my headphones in, just listening, and just working away, and it's fun. I do remember as a kid though, I really got obsessed with the Three Stooges. I loved there was just something about maybe just the way they were and their slapstick and their routine that just kind of my mind just got onto it. But then it became more than that. I actually enjoyed seeing, if you remember at the beginning of an episode on the screen would come, there would be the title card, it would show the Stooges, and it would have the picture of Moe, Larry, and Curly, and then it would have the title of that particular episode. And I would actually be obsessed with, how sometimes how it would fit into the frame of the television. Sometimes it would look a little bit smaller, and then sometimes it would fill it bigger. And I would like it if it filled the screen a lot better, and some stuff like that. And um, I even had interest in how the frame of the film was and how certain objects, fit into the bottom of the TV and other things. It was just the weirdest thing. Sometimes I can remember being at someone's house watching them once, and I'd have to have my arm on the television to kind of, block the bottom because I wanted it to kind of fit a certain way. It was that weird. I would be probably about 9 years old, uh, and that's how I was. And it made no sense to anybody, and it made me feel weird, but it was just the way I was. It was the way I had to operate and make my mind, be able to live with whatever I was seeing or doing or being around. It was the same way with like watching Bugs Bunny or Looney Tunes. Sometimes the title cards that came on there, I'd like them to be, a certain size or a certain fill the certain fill the frame a certain way. It was just that kind of weird interest because and it was not something that I think I could ever explain to anybody, and that's what made it challenging. So everybody would just, wonder why am I watching stuff like this over and over again, and why am I? It just didn't make sense. But I mean, another one though that I really liked that other people like, even if they aren't on the spectrum, is Trains. I love Trains. I still love Trains, and I especially loved. I like to watch videos on YouTube of trains from many, many years ago, seeing what they were and what they would have looked like when I was growing up, because that just brings back such vivid memories for me. I just remember one town where we lived in, the railroad came through town, and whenever we'd be out and about, I'd always want to see a train. I'd always love it when the gates would light up and the crossing signals would light up and the gates would come down, and then you'd hear the horn going and you'd hear the train. Sometimes I like the sound of the horns, even if I wouldn't want them necessarily to be right beside me where they'd be so loud, because at the same time, though, if I'm in the car, it wouldn't matter so much. Um, I remember liking game shows. I really loved Wheel of Fortune. I loved to see it on the TV and see the wheel spin, and just see the puzzle light up, and then the effects on that. I liked Family Feud. I liked the Price is Right. A lot of the visuals on those shows, were things that I really latched onto. My mind really latched onto them, uh, and a lot of times things like that were just sources of enjoyment that I felt like I couldn't really share with many others or anybody because I didn't know how to express them because it was hard enough for me to express a lot of things. In another video, I've talked about that where I talk about difficulty speaking, but you can check that video out. Probably have a link for that in the description. But also, it's just that because of that interests, specific interests like that are things that I can't really share easily or couldn't share easily growing up with others because I just didn't know as a kid or even as a teenager or even into a young adulthood, I didn't know how to express those interests, and I didn't know how to uh, communicate how my mind worked. Because in a way, I don't even know if it fully made sense to me. It did in a way, but it didn't make sense in a way that I knew how to express it or explain it, or explain how certain things like that made me happy and certain other little things didn't. And so it kind of led to some loneliness and frustration, I guess, and kind of feeling that um, those things weren't things that I'd ever be able to explain to people in a way they could understand and that they could get me. That's a whole different thing I could go into about how is it people could actually get me. And I've often felt like nobody could. But the thing is, it's hard to go through a childhood and young adulthood with all those interests, all those things, and then not be able to know how to tell people about them because you go through your childhood and into your adulthood feeling like you're not really affirmed as a person. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I never was by anybody. That would be wrong. At the same time, though, the fact that I couldn't really explain my acute interests and, all those things that I described, all those petty little things, and just why they meant so much to me, or just that my mind worked that way. The fact that I couldn't do it just kind of made me feel like I was not able to be affirmed as kind of as an individual, as part of the functioning world. And but I tell you, especially, I have to say, since I've gotten to know when I got to know my wife, when we dated and got married, or just, that is something that just has been such a breakthrough in my case because she has affirmed me and I've been able to actually express things about myself that I probably never was in times past. And it's just such an amazing thing because it's opened up that part of me that just that I thought could never be opened. And I could go on and on about, what it is about having my wife, and just what an amazing breakthrough that is, especially for somebody on the spectrum. I'm sure I'll do a video about that later. But it's important if especially somebody young who's on the spectrum, to try, if you can, to take note of anything that they seem to have an interest in. And you can even ask them questions about it. Don't be afraid to, gently, give, you know, just the impression that you're thinking about them, that you care about what's on their mind, even though they may think they could never get it out or say it. That can mean so much to somebody, not who can be a young person, or it could be actually somebody who's of age. And so that can really be a breakthrough. That can really just set somebody like that on eagle's wings. Because I know it has for me, especially since I've been married just with my wife. But since I've been able to with her, it's opened up and helped me to feel so much better about doing that with other people, even in ways that I never thought I could. But let me know if you have anything that you really find interesting, even if you're not on the spectrum. Maybe you haven't been able to express to people before. But if you are on the spectrum, yeah, please let me know in the comments. Feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I will see you on our next voyage. This is the captain signing off. Bye.